So in this next section, we're going to be solving by graphing. And when we're doing this, we're looking at how many times it crosses the x-axis. So sometimes when you graph, you're going to end up with two solutions, which just means that it crosses the x-axis twice. So it's crossing here and it's crossing here. Sometimes you're going to end up with something where it only crosses once. So it might be a graph that looks like this. So it just crosses in one little dot. Or you're going to have a graph where there are no solutions because it never crosses the x-axis. So it might cross something like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to graph this. We're going to find where it crosses the x-axis or where y is 0 in our table. So we might have to add numbers in order for y to equal 0 in our table. But let's take a look at this example. So we're still going to use the same thing that we did in the last section. We're going to use negative b over 2a. So if I do that, negative b over 2a, I'm going to have the opposite of negative 2 would be positive 2. The number I'm assuming is in front of the squared term is 1. So I have 2 over 2, which is 1. So now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make my table. That means that 1 is going to be the middle number in my table. I'm going to leave a little bit of space in case I have to add numbers. So I might pick 0 and negative 1. I might pick 2 and 3. So if I plug in negative 1, I'm going to get negative 5. Remember, if I plug in that there, it's also going to be here. If I plug in 0, I like to plug in 0. I'm going to get negative 8. And negative 8. If I plug in 1, I get negative 9. So right now I still haven't crossed the x-axis. So I might add another number. If I plug in negative 2 and 4 here, I'm going to end up with 0. Again, I'm just plugging in these numbers for both x's and solving them. So if I graph this, I'm going to be at negative 2, 0. I'm going to be at negative 1, negative 5. Be at 0, negative 8, you're not going to be able to see it on the graph here. And 1, negative 9, same thing. I'm just going to show the coming back up over here. At 2, negative 8, at 3, I'll be at negative 5. At 4, I'll be at 0. So basically it's going to be a graph that's going to go down, and then it's going to come back up. Okay, my solution is where it crosses. It crosses right here. I still need to see your graph even though you made a table. So my solution is that it crosses at x equals negative 2 and at x equals 4. Let's take a look at another one. So if I have something like x squared minus 6x equals negative 9. Okay, it has to be set equal to 0 in order to do this. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So when we do this now, we have x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. So we can go ahead, we're going to use negative b over 2a. So we're going to have 6 over 2 times 1. So we have 6 over 2, which is 3. So that means 3 is going to be the middle number in my table. So I might use 2, 1 and 4, 5. If I plug in 1, I'm going to get 4. If I plug in 2, I get 1. If I plug in 3, I get 0. So let's graph this. So if we graph this, we're going to go to 1, 4, 2, 1, 3, 0, 4, 1, and 5, 4. We can go ahead and we're going to graph it. It crosses at x equals 3. So this is an example of where it only crosses in one spot. Let's take a look at one last example. So taking a look at this one, we're going to start off with negative x squared minus 3x minus 5 equals 0. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use negative b over 2a. So I'm going to have 3 over 2 times negative 1. So I have negative 3 over 2, or negative 1.5, however you want to look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug in. Be careful when you're plugging in numbers like this. So let's see, I have negative 1.5. So I could plug in negative 2 and negative 1. I could plug in 0. I could plug in negative 3. Just make sure that they're equidistant on either side. If they're not, then they're just not going to reflect, and that's fine. You just have to plug in everything separately. If I plug in 0, I'm going to start at the bottom. If I plug in 0, I get negative 5. If I plug in negative 1, I get negative 3. It gets tricky when you start plugging in halves and whatnot, but you're going to end up with negative 2.75. What I'm noticing is that as my numbers get bigger, they are getting more and more negative. So let's go ahead and graph this so far before we start adding more numbers to our table. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plot negative 3, negative 5, negative 2, negative 3, negative 1.5, negative 2.75, negative 1, negative 3, and 0, negative 5. So I'm noticing that this is opening downwards. If that's my vertex, it's never going to cross the x-axis. So this is one of them that has no solution to it.